I am a member of the Rotary Club of Lake Stevens. I've been a Rotarian for 16 years, the first 4 of which I was in District 5030 to the south of us. So, and I'm also a member of the Communications and Training Committees. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Zoom meeting platform features. They have a couple of different subscription models. There's the basic one, and you don't need Zoom. You don't need to be a member or subscribe to Zoom or have an account to use Zoom. If you're given a link to a meeting, you can just click on that link and the computer kind of does the rest for you. So, but they do have a couple of subscription models. The basic allows up to 40 minutes for meeting length. Though if you're meeting just one other person, you can talk all day if you want. So, and during this pandemic, I know they've been kind of relaxing that 40-minute time limit. So if you have to record your meeting or want to record it using the basic subscription, it'll record on your computer versus the Pro and above models, those can go onto the cloud as well. The basic does have a waiting room, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. It has breakout rooms. There's also options to use a whiteboard and annotation where everybody can collaborate depending on the features of the meeting. And the Pro includes all that. You can have up to 100 participants and even more for additional fees. I talked about the recording. If you record your meetings, it can go to the cloud. You can personalize that waiting room, make it a little more personal to your organization. Again, it has breakout rooms. There's also polling available in the Pro features, and it gives the host and moderator some user management feature controls that you don't get with the basic. And you can also get reports out of that subscription level if that's of value to you. Waiting for my screen to catch up here. There we go. So again, I talked about the different devices you were using. So the icons will appear in different locations. If you're using a desktop or laptop, at the bottom of your screen, and you may have to move your mouse to activate the icon features, but at the bottom you'll see the icons. If you're using a tablet, like one made by Apple or other manufacturers, those icons will appear in the upper right corner. And if you're using a handheld device with an Android or Apple operating systems, they'll typically appear at the bottom of your screen. You may have to activate the More button there to access other additional features on that. So keep that in mind as we go through our presentation this evening. I'm going to talk about the meeting setup features. Let's see, hold on a second here.
And again, while James is setting that up, if you have questions, please use the chat box and we'll get those questions to James in a moderated fashion. You can use the chat box and it will come direct to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod. And so if you do have a subscription and you've opened up your account, this is what the main page will look like. And you're going to want to, this is the place you can begin setting specific features for your organization and yourself as well. I encourage everybody to put in a profile picture. The purpose of that is if you're at any time need to turn your video off of your own computer, then a picture can show in your place instead of just your name. Many of you right now have your names up, and that's okay. But a picture also is helpful at times. The other information here on the screen just indicates the kind of account you have, the time zone you're in, and things like that. Let's go to the meetings tab here, and this is where you would set up your meetings. And there's 4 tabs across the top: upcoming, previous, personal meeting room, and meeting templates. I'll talk about that in a couple minutes. Under previous meetings, you can see that I've been to several in the last few weeks. And then in your upcoming meetings, if you have any already scheduled, they would appear here already, but we're going to go ahead and open the schedule a new meeting up, and we can type in the topic such as tonight's meeting, which is our Zoom tips.
James, I'm just going to interrupt now. Apparently, a couple of folks have their settings on their Zoom meeting right now, probably set to speaker's view. And so they're not getting your shared screen. So you'll have to just check what your settings are on your screen. You may have it clicked on Spotlight Video as well, or Highlight Video.
Okay, let's double check here. No, I have mine is set
Yours
to the
is set, so it may be the user that'll have to check their screen. They may have it set on a Spotlight Video, which would mean that the speaker is always highlighted, not the screen behind it. So do check your own machine and see if you can do that.
Thank you.
And then James, will you be covering access to the whiteboard?
I will
A little later.
somewhat.
Okay, thank you.
So this is the place you'd enter the topic of your meeting. You can talk about a description if you wish, your date and time, how long the meeting goes. Can be, you know, an hour and a half or 5 hours or whatever. If it's in your time zone. If it's a recurring meeting, this is where you do that, and you can set your different settings on that, whether it's daily or if, let's say it's your regular weekly club meeting, you can make that weekly. That way the login information is always the same. If it's a committee of your club, maybe your international service committee meets once a month, a day or two before your board meeting. You can set that here as well. And you can change and adjust occurrences. If you're planning an event, a fundraiser for your club, you can set it up to be every other week or whatever works for you. So, and then the meeting ID will generate automatically. And the meeting should always have a password. This avoids outsiders trying to come into your meeting and disrupting it. That's not a pleasant thing to do. So down here under meeting options, you can adjust these as you need to. If you enable join before host, then if you're the host of the meeting, you've sent out the invitation or had that sent out, then members can come in and participate in the meeting before you join. It's kind of like if you're the club president, you're not always the first one at the meeting location, but members get there to help set up on things, or they just come and socialize for a few minutes before the meeting starts. So that's kind of what this would allow. Otherwise, you should have a waiting room, and then you can come in when you've logged in, and you'll see a bunch of people in the waiting room, and I'll talk more about that later. So, and then you can also set up your meeting to automatically record. So if it's a recurring meeting, you can always set it up to record and go back and listen to it later, or perhaps depending on what your plan is, you could also allow that to be shown to other members who missed the meeting, perhaps either through your club website or Facebook or other social media setup. So we're going to go ahead and save that. And then it'll show some calendar options for you personally. And you can add it to your Google Calendar, Outlook, or other calendar you have there. And then you also have an option to edit the meeting. And I talked about templates earlier, so you can save it as a template. So if, again, it's a recurring meeting, you don't have to keep entering all the specifics every time. You can have it as a template. Weekly club meeting, and it'll always have the same setup that you did the first time around. So then this is also a place you could start the meeting, but you don't have to do that now. So now we're going to go to my meetings, and you can see here it's set up in your upcoming meeting schedule. So how do I get people to come to it? So you want to click on the Zoom tips or the title for that in that case. And under the invite link, you see that link here. It shows the meeting ID, which is this 8 or 9, 10-digit number, depending on, and there's often a password, and it's kind of a convoluted number. When you set up the meeting, you can also set up a specific password. I know in some of my organizations that I'm part of, they have a specific password, so it's really easy to remember. But you can also copy this information here and then add that into an email directly. You can also send the invite out through your calendar features as well. So that's how that works. Under the recordings tab, your local recording, it'll show here. If you have cloud capability, it'll be on that side as well. But here you're able to look at past recordings if you still have them saved. And when the recording happens, it doesn't end until the host hangs up from the meeting. And at that time, the meeting will then download to either the cloud computer or the host's computer. And that takes several minutes. It's a video file. And on my computer, I use QuickTime. So that takes a while to download, and it downloads with some other files, like a chat record and other things like that. And at that point, once that's happened, you can save it wherever you want to, and then you can open up in your media player, and you'll be able to edit it. So, for example, tonight, our meeting, we're actually going to probably truncate the front end a little bit and the back end a little bit, and it'll be available on our District 5050 YouTube channel here in the next day or two. So those folks that want to see it can watch it then, but they don't have to watch the whole beginning and the whole end. So that's how that works. In the settings area, this is important too, because this is where you can really fine tune how the meetings are going to work for you. One of the best practices is not to have your video on when you join a meeting or when you're hosting the meeting to start with. And that is because maybe you're not ready to have everybody see what you look like. My club meets in the mornings, and some of our members just aren't ready visually to let us know what they look like. So they keep their camera off, but you can set it up to have it off to begin with. So if somebody's running late to a meeting, when they come in, it's not disruptive. And this is the place to have those individual settings for a specific, and this is kind of a broad brush. You can change those specifically as you set up every meeting. The same with the audio. You want to have your audio off when you join a meeting. That way you're not disrupting, and we don't get to hear the dog barking or the baby crying or the garbage truck that might be outside your window. So there's other settings here about meeting IDs, whether you need a password. And then as we scroll down, there's other features here as well. You can also allow members to chat. Right now, this meeting, we don't have the private chat feature on. So any comments in the chat box, and I'll explain how to get there later, only go to the moderator. So, but this is the place to adjust those things. You can also add files to that, feedback to Zoom because they want to keep improving their product. This sharing on the screen sharing thing is about who allows that. If the host's allowed, or you can allow participants to share and things like that. So annotation on whiteboard, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Remote control allows somebody else to control your screen. So if, for example, I have a presentation and somebody else needed to actually click the slides or whatever, however that works, you can allow that person to remotely control your screen sharing. So this is the place to set those. Reporting participants to Zoom, you can enable that, because if somebody comes in your meeting and does something inappropriate, then they can be blocked in the future. So breakout rooms, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And the rest really is kind of things that you can explore on your own, and we'll talk a bit more about that. So that's what the Zoom account looks like, and I encourage you, if you have an account, to go look into that. And now I'm going to go back to my presentation here, and boom. Okay. So now we're going to talk about the icons, and you already saw what they look like, where they are. So now I get to talk a little bit more about those. In the audio, on your, so if you can all kind of join with me here, and you can hover your mouse so that it activates the icons. If they're at the bottom of your screen, your far left one is your microphone. So right now everybody's, but mine is muted, and you can click on that to unmute. It's best practice to keep your audio off while somebody's giving a presentation. Again, that minimizes any feedback or background noise, and just the same as you would do if you're in an in-person meeting, you don't want to be disruptive. If you click on the arrow next to that, the menu drops up in this case, or pops up. There's two major sections there, select a microphone and select a speaker. A lot of people have a separate microphone that they use for presentations, and so it would appear in that list, a headset mic or a desk mic versus the computer mic. And this is a place to make sure you've got the right mic set for your presentation or your speakers. Also with the speaker, your speaker system, it's either the computer speakers or the external speakers if you have those. You also have options where you can switch speakers or test them as well, plus your microphone. You also have an option to test your microphone when you join a meeting. Is my microphone working? You do a quick recording, and then it'll play it back for you. Is it the right volume? Are you too close? If you or your presenter is you're using a headset mic, you don't want that microphone too close to their mouth, because then that really distorts the sound. The next icon over is the video. That's where you turn your video on and off. And next to that is the, sorry, got ahead of myself there. Next to the start video is also another pop-up menu. A lot of folks have a separate camera from their computer, so that's the place to do that. And one of the options there is the choose visual background. I can't demonstrate that right now, but I will later, and we can talk about that at that time. The next icon over is your participants. If you click on that, a participants menu opens up. Depending on your computer, it could be a separate floating window. And there you'll see a list of all the participants. And on the far right, you'll see icons for their microphones and cameras. So I can see that everybody's camera's off, everybody's mic's off except mine. If you hover over your line, you'll see that you have options there. You can mute or unmute your mic. And then there's a more button. And I'll go into that a little bit. At the bottom of the participant list, there are 3 buttons. Generally, there could be more depending on the setup of the meeting. There's the invite button. That button allows you to invite somebody to join your meeting. You click on that, you can send an email to somebody real quick. Maybe you've invited a guest and they forgot, or they're late or whatever, so you can type in a quick note with the invite, and then they can join the meeting. Again, there's a mute or unmute button at the bottom. And the raise hand feature, if you want to ask a question, and we'll have an opportunity to do that a little later, that's the place you would go in to raise your hand. And if you click on that, then it changes to lower hand. So right now, I'd like you to hover over your own name and use the more button. Rod, did you take that away?
I stopped video, but they should be able to hover over that, okay?
Okay, because mine went away on my other setup here. So if you click on the more button, then the option that should pop up is rename. So if you click on that, if everybody can do that, and then so your name pops up, and what I'd like you to do now is put a comma after your name and then a space, and then type in the name of your club. So go ahead and do that now. And then hit enter. Some folks are still working on that, it looks like.
I think we're all still not able to access it.
Okay, so Rod, you did something to the participant list. There we go. Okay, that should change now. Also in the rename option, you have the remember my name for future meetings. You can click or unclick that as you want. That also pops up when you join a meeting, because maybe depending on, you might use this Zoom meeting platform in other organizations, and they may know you as Mr. Smith versus John Smith. So you might not necessarily want to always have the same name pop up. In my role here in the district, in my club meetings, I'm James Monroe, but when I go visit other um, clubs, I put my name in followed by Peace Arts Journal so that attendees at that other club know who I am. So looks like most of us were able to do that. So that's awesome. Now I know all the clubs which you belong to. So that's good. Thank you. The next button over in your, at the bottom there is your chat button. You can click on that. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the place where you can have conversations. So right now it's set up where you can only send a note to the moderator, Rod, and this is a place where you can put in questions. It's also, meetings can be set up where you can enable a private conversation. So if I wanted to send a note directly to, let's say, Gary O'Reilly, I could put click on the, at the bottom where it says to, either it'll say everyone and then followed by a list of names. So I could click on that down arrow and go to that specific name, and then I can send Gary a note saying, hey, don't forget to mention this, for example, if he's got if he's going to be giving a report in a few minutes. So that might be a place to do that. In a larger setting like this, it's good to kind of minimize the sidebar conversations and just keep it so that it's on topic. So that's the place to do that. The chat button, the window can be a floating window, or it might partner with the participants window depending on what you've got going on. Move a couple more to the right there is the record button. So that's a place that the meeting can be recorded. You can record the meeting on your own as well. Just if you need some specific information, it's polite though to let people know that you're recording if the host isn't recording directly. So the record button will change to stop and pause buttons, things like that. Next icon over is the reactions button. So if you go ahead and click on that, you'll see a couple of icons there above that. One is looks like a hand, and actually it's clapping hands like applause. And the one next to that is a thumbs up. So if you like something that somebody shared, or gave a happy buck, or said, hey, my son's graduating in a couple days from whatever school, kindergarten, whatever, or somebody gave a happy buck because of this, whatever, you can let everybody know, hey, that sounded really cool, I like that, or whatever, and use these icons as a way to kind of react back to the speaker or the presenter. So they'll show up in the upper left corner of your picture or video that you're displaying, and so that's what that's about. And our next icon at the bottom too, depending on if you're the host or not, there's a more button going on as well. It brings up additional features. So so now I'm going to go back to the share screen icon there. It's that big green button. When you click on that, what happens is a window pops up on your computer, and it gives you several choices. I don't have a display of that, so I'm going to describe it visually. And what will appear is you can share your entire desktop. You can share a specific window out of that desktop. So that's what we've done here. I've shared the specific window of this presentation. You can also have options to share audio files. Let's say you want to play a piece of music. Let's say you're going to play God, Oh Canada, or in stateside we'd play the Star Spangled Banner. But you could do that off a iPhone or other MP player that's it's best to be plugged into your computer versus a Bluetooth. But that's an option too. If your presentation has a video component, like you're playing a video like we did earlier, at the bottom of that share screen, we'll have a couple of option clicks there. You want to make sure you enable those. One says computer sound, so use computer sound. The other is to optimize video. And that way, when you click those, the video that'll play will play at its top peak performance. It's also another best practice to turn off your video while somebody else is giving a presentation, especially if they have video in their presentation. That again minimizes any distracting visual cues or whatever going on your end. It also helps bring the presentation delivery to the end user much quicker, because then the whole system's not trying to play your video as well as everything else. And if you ever have a message on your end that says insufficient video or insufficient
insufficient
well,
memory.
really what is, I'm sorry, Rod?
Insufficient memory to run video.
Yeah,
those kind of things.
insufficient memory, right. Then it's probably at your end. You just go ahead and turn off your video, your camera, and then you should be able to then catch up and see the whole presentation real time. So
And
the other options on the share screen. Sorry?
James, as a host or moderator, when somebody is doing a presentation as you are now, I have gone through and shut everybody's video off. So that exactly what you're talking about, you'll have all the bandwidth you need and there won't be anything interfering with that. They can reactivate it individually on their own, but I keep it off during the presentation. So at the end of the presentation, we'll invite them to restart video.
Exactly. And so if you're hosting or moderating, as Rod is, he went ahead and turned everybody's camera off if they hadn't already. So I appreciate that. So that's a feature that is available to the host of the meeting. So when you set up a Zoom meeting, you're the host, even if you turn it over to somebody else later. But so those are features that can be set up. So thank you for that. The other options in the share screen menu window is what's called a whiteboard. And that's basically really what it is. You can have that up on your screen, and let's see if I can do that here. There we go. Boom. So Rod, you can see that?
Yep, got the whiteboard.
Okay, good. So here, let's say you have a committee meeting and you want to collaborate on something. This is a place where you can do that. So you can enter text, or you can draw on it. Let's say we're going to draw a big circle here. You can change the color of your drawings. Oops, I want to erase that. Okay, there we go. You can also use a spotlight. See, that didn't work. There we go. So now you're able to follow my pointer a little better. If you want to put a stamp, oops, let's say, I'm going to put some stars out there. So this is a place that you can collaborate. It's just like using your chalkboard in school when we were all in grammar school, or nowadays it's a big whiteboard. And so this is a place you can do that. You can undo those, clear them, save them, things like that. So that's an option to you using using the whiteboard feature. So and then, oops. Well, that didn't work. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Some other options for you under that as well, the whiteboard, if you're using it, is you can't see it, but there's a remote control button there that allows you to turn over, I talked about that earlier, your control of your cursor to somebody else. So I did mention that earlier. There's a more button as part of the annotation whiteboard control that gives you additional options. I certainly encourage you to explore all that.
James, could you just again tell us where we find the whiteboard option? The questions popped
Yeah,
up in the
sure.
chat.
So when you're going to your share screen, you're going to show your presentation. One of the options on the share screen is the whiteboard. So you click on that, and then just click the share button, and you have your whiteboard pop up. So I know you can't see the controls of the whiteboard that I'm using, but if you used it at your end, you'll be able to find that.
And so I can see it, and it may be because I'm host. It says you are viewing James Monroe's screen, and then next to that it says view options at the top of the window. And so I'm
Yes,
not sure if everybody else can see that or not, but when I click on view options, annotate is one of the choices I still have there.
right. And if you allow, one of the settings you can do for your meeting is to allow others to annotate as well. So, like I said, if you're collaborating on something, you can come in and show that. So, all right. So now I'm going to go back to my screen. There we go. Okay. All right, another thing about the Zoom meeting platform is the how the screen looks at your end. So when there's a presentation going on, that occupies most of the screen, and when there's and then the speakers will be, or not the speakers, but the attendees will be in smaller screens off to the side, the bottom, or the top, just depending on how you've set it up. And how that looks is if there is no presentation showing the whiteboard, or in this case, our slides, then your screen can look like this. This is what we call the Hollywood Squares or Brady Bunch look. You'll see various pictures of a bunch of people just plastered all over your screen. Depending on your computer setup, it could be, in this case, 5x5, so that's 25 max. They can go up to 49, I hear, depending on your screen. And if there's more than that, then they'll appear on the next page. So at either side, left or right, will be arrows, and attached to that arrow will say 1 of 2 or 1 of 3, depending on how many people are joining your meeting. So in this case, the highlighted box is the speaker. That's the mayor of Palm Coast, Florida. She's giving an update to the Flagler County Rotary Club about what's happening in Palm Coast. And then the other speaker view, or the other view, is the speaker view. And right here we have President of Rotary International, Mark Maloney. And to toggle between those, in your upper left corner of your screen is the speaker view or gallery view. So that's where you would toggle between the two views. So in this case, Mr. Maloney was talking to the Cross Timbers Rotary Club last week in Texas and giving them an update on what's happening in Rotary International. And he'll actually be joining us here in District 5050 on Saturday morning at 9 a.m. You'll be receiving an email about that. I encourage you to participate in that. And if you do, please wear a Hawaiian shirt.
James, just while you're there, you were showing the gallery view, the Hollywood Squares view. Somebody's asked, how would you do a screen capture of that view? And I'm presuming you do that with your print screen feature on your machine.
And there are a variety of options for that. Excellent question. I have a software that comes depending on the model. On the Macintosh system, it's called Grab. In the Windows system, it's called Snip, a snipping tool. So, but there are print screen options too, where you can grab that and edit those later. So check on your computer and grab those. You could also take a picture with your handheld device, which I've done a few times too, but the screen grab is much easier, much cleaner too. So
And
great question.
there is one other option, which is the side-by-side view. Maybe you could just show us that.
Yeah, I don't have that. Sorry, Rod.
Okay.
Don't have that. So,
Dave,
you mean
Dave,
you mean
maybe
where the where there's the presentation and the speaker next to them?
Correct. Yeah. Side by
Yeah,
side view.
right, right. There is that also. So yeah. So now
Dave,
let's.
maybe Dave could jump in and just show us that. Dave,
Oh yeah.
or
Okay.
give us a
Sure.
quick. So Dave, I've unmuted you.
Okay, there, right at the very top, there's a view options, at least on my laptop. And if you click on that, you can select side by side.
Which
And
is the same place you'll find that annotate, correct, Dave?
you'll find
Yeah, it's at the top of the screen.
the top of the screen, you can, if you put it in the speaker's view, besides that, then you'll see, in this case, you'll see James on one side and his presentation on the other. If you have it on gallery view, you're going to see everybody. So it's just another option for viewing. It makes, of course, the presentation much smaller.
Exactly. So yeah, thanks for that, Dave. So now just to review some best practices and reminders. If you're hosting, you should have an account with Zoom. So it can be the basic, or if you have a pro account, that works just as well. If you have your own account, though, it's an opportunity for you to practice your presentation if you're giving one. And so that's what I did earlier today. I went on and practiced this and made sure everything worked. And first couple times around it didn't, so I had to make some changes. So it also gives you a chance to double check your settings, testing your audio and video. And again, if you're using an external headset, use one with a USB connection. And again, it's best practice to mute your microphone while others are speaking or presenting. So the share specific applications has to more or less do with what you're showing from your computer. So you don't want people to see stuff on your desktop. Mine's pretty messy, so I don't want people to see that. And if you're changing applications, let's say you're showing or you want people to hear a piece of music at the beginning of your meeting, then use your new share feature. That way you don't have to stop sharing, going to a big screen of everybody's video feeds, and then back to your share. So just another best practice. Keep yourself muted, as I talked about, and turn off your video. I mentioned that. And if you have a large number of attendees for your question and answer session, then the moderator should manage that. That way the presenter doesn't have to worry about trying to read those chat messages or whatever. And you can either say in your message to the moderator, hey, I want to ask a question, or you can answer the question, put in the question in the chat. Maybe 2 or 3 attendees have the same general question, so the moderator can blend that into one question. So, and it's good practice too to let the folks know when it comes to the Q&A session that, hey, Gary, you're going to you're first up. You chimed in first. You're going to ask a question, and then Bev, you're going to be on deck because you asked next. So let the person who's on deck know that they're going to be on deck. That way they're ready to come on board when the first person ahead of you is done with their questions. So, and some examples of that you'll see in the coffee corner. This week we had the chair of Rotary International's Polio Plus campaign on that, and the moderator handle all those questions and let those folks know. And other club training events, we've done the same thing with that as well. So, tools.
James,
sure.
if I may, just while we're here, earlier on we had some challenges with people not seeing your presentation, but rather seeing you. I'm just going to suggest that everybody right now hover your mouse over James' picture, either at the top or the side, and then right-click and select Pin Video. And when you do that, what should happen is the presentation will swap to where he just was, and James will show as the primary video on your screen. And in the upper left corner, you now have switched to shared content or unpinned video, and that will get you back to the presentation as the feature and James back in your ribbon.
Excellent. Yes. Thank you, Rod, for that.
Okay.
So Zoom does have a huge support file. I encourage you to visit that, and there's lots of training videos there and other materials that'll help dive into specifics. And you can also ask us on the training committee, and we certainly welcome your feedback on that, on any of these. So before we get to questions, oops, I'm going to show you how I change my background. So back under stop video in that location, next to that is an arrow. So I click on that and I can choose my virtual background. Now you can't see this, what I'm doing, but a window pops up. It's basically the settings box. And on the right side of the screen is your virtual background options. And if you don't have any virtual backgrounds loaded yet, your only choice is none. But there's a upload feature there. It could be a plus symbol to add an image. And in that location, you then add your image. So it could be this, for example, or it could be next year's theme, okay? It might be just a field of flowers, could be the Aurora Borealis, which is loading there, okay? I've also been over to the islands. So there's just a variety of options there. And this won't work on every platform. So my older laptop, it doesn't work really well. It's because I don't have a green screen, which is really what this relies on. The images don't appear very nicely, and sometimes the person kind of disappears into the image. So, so that's the place to have your virtual background. I'm going to go back to our logo there. So that's how that happens. All righty. Now we'll take some questions.
So James,
not a question, but one thing I find very good to use is when you've got all the mics muted, instead of having to unmute your mic, you just hold your space bar down temporarily and talk, and then release the space bar. It makes it really easy for everybody to keep their mics muted, but you only talk when you put your space bar down.
Right. And that's an excellent point. Thanks, John, for that.
We have a couple of questions. I think you've answered most of them as we went through, James.
Okay.
We talked about the screenshot, the whiteboard. Where there was a question about getting an okay from speakers who may be appearing in your meeting. And I would suggest to you that, particularly if you're recording the meetings, but in any case, you should make your speakers aware that they are doing that. Particularly if they're speaking to you and they have a professional designation around whatever it is they're speaking on. So you want to make sure that they understand that there is a recording and it will be posted to YouTube or Vimeo or wherever it is that you might be posting that. I have not been getting speaker releases, which you might do if you were recording them in a live situation, because again, by participating in a Zoom meeting, they understand that there's a recording that could be happening. And Roger, you'd asked some questions.
If we can go ahead
and Roger, the questions.
Your videos on.
Yeah, the question here, Roger, why don't you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, my question's really about, I mean, I don't even know if I'm looking at appropriate at the screen. Is it a confusing background? Are there any sort of professional best practices, how close you are, how far from the screen, etc., for the, for better communication? I mean, some things you see a lot on TV, you get some presenters who are very effective, using their hands, etc., but I just wonder if there's any best practices from that.
Yeah, so generally you don't want to be sitting up close like this.
Okay.
But you don't want to be too far back either, because it's hard to hear too, especially. But it also depends on what you're showing. Maybe you want people to see whatever your background is. If you have your flag and the Rotary flag or your club banner, that's certainly acceptable. So it really just kind of depends. In a normal conversation, we're not really this close anyway. So this is a normal situation, kind of just a chest. Hopefully that helps, Roger.
And Roger, what I would say to you is that you'll notice that the three of us, basically, you're getting a head and shoulders, and
Right.
you see Dave there as well. Keep your head down from the top, right, and sit so that your head is near the top of the frame, but you're probably then going to pick up a head and shoulders. So James just moved in, and now you see the top of his head's cut off. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
the other thing too is that there was a lot of discussion early on television about what background you should be using. Some people had a whole bunch of books, and some people have dirty linens. And I mean, I guess really you have to be careful about the professional background you have.
Yeah, exactly that. And you also, if you don't want people to see your office or whatever room you're in, then,
Yeah.
we don't want to see the dirty linen either. So,
the one,
so if you have the capability, go ahead and use the background. You also want to be aware of if you don't have a background, what the lighting is. So if you're outside, you don't want to have the camera facing you. If you're kind of in a dark area with a lot of light back here, then we can't see you at all. So just, play around with the settings and how that looks. And
okay, that's good. Thank you.
You want to be front lit is the point. You don't want to be backlit. Otherwise, it's the old, you show up as a silhouette. With regard to the backgrounds, the virtual backgrounds, many of them are large files, and therefore, when they're projecting on your screen, they use lots of memory to do that, lots of bandwidth to do that. So if you have a connection that's not particularly stable, your Wi-Fi is perhaps a little weaker, whatever it might be, those do eat bandwidth. So there are some low resolution backgrounds that are very professional that you can use. So
yes,
just
sir.
be cautious that you're not taking a large photo, dumping it into your virtual background and clogging up the internet. Somebody asked where you find those. Again, if you go down to the lower left corner where your video icon is and click the up arrow, one of the options you'll receive there is choose virtual background. Click on that and it'll take you through.
And then as far as getting the files, the images, you can use them, photos that you've taken or ones that you've acquired through another source. So.
Right. Dave, do you have anything you'd like to add at this point?
I can say that our club tried something last week that you might be interested in. We were recognizing students with scholarships, and we figured that family and friends would want to get on and also recognize them. So we were able to use our Zoom meeting, but have it show on Facebook Live simultaneously. And that way the family could get on and watch the presentations. And it kept from having 100 people on the screen. And it worked really well. We had a lot of good comments. We posted it and left the video on our club Facebook page, and it really worked pretty well. There's a down in the more area of the screen down at the bottom, at least on my laptop, is where you there's a setting that you can grab to stream it on Facebook or on YouTube as well. I noticed I first noticed it because the South Everett Mucko-Teal Club, one day at their Zoom meeting, it popped up on my Facebook site, and I thought, gee, that's pretty cool. So I studied a little bit, and it's a pretty good option for adding people.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that, so thank you for doing that. So as the host or moderator, at the bottom of your screen, one of the icons is the More button. It's got usually 3 little dots, and that gives you additional features, including this share feature that Dave just talked about. Other questions, Rod?
That's all I have in the chat box. I think we've covered everything. If I've missed anybody's question.
So this, if you go back to your participants icon and click on that, that'll open up that participants window, and at the bottom it says raise hand. So this is another place you could raise your hand to be recognized if you want to say something, ask a question or or share a comment or something. So that feature is also available to you. Maybe a couple of you can go ahead and do that, just so you can see what your screen looks like. So several people have got their hands raised. So there you go. And if you are the host and you have more than one page worth of video feeds, keeping your participants list open, it also shows you the raised hand icon. So that might be easier to keep track of more than, in this case, 16 viewers. So looks like Dave is setting the sun for us. So, all right, well, I'd like to thank everybody for participating this evening, Rod for hosting. So.
Well, thank you very much, James, for your presentation. There was lots of useful information there. And I think one of the key elements that I'd just like to remind folks is that really in the settings, when you set up your meetings, that is one of the places that you should spend a little time understanding that once that's done once, you don't have to keep worrying about it each and every time you open a new meeting. So as James pointed out, when you go into your account, look at all the settings there, play around a little bit. You can always turn something back off if you turn it on and don't like the look of it, or do that by error. So it's pretty seamless. You can give it a shot and just try everything new that you can to make your Zoom meetings more fun and engage people in your Rotary Club and those that are visiting to keep them active during these challenging times. Thanks everybody for the work you continue to do for Rotary, for your communities, and thank you for joining us this evening. This will be, as James noted, posted on the Rotary District 5050 YouTube channel. At the end of this presentation, we'll be sending that recording, and within the next couple days, it will be up on the site. So thanks everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Stay well.